Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening for a Fireside Chat, or rather a Fireside Chat GPT. And we've gathered three specialists with very different perspectives on the subject. And so I'm going to keep my part short because they have much more interesting things to talk about than I do on this subject. Just to say that it has an amazing impact already, the ChatGPT. I don't know if you guys are aware of the phenomenon, but OpenAI, which runs ChatGPT, had about 1 million users by the end of the first week. Within 1 month, they had 300 million daily pings, the uses of the service. And the expectation is by the end of 2023, they'll have 1 billion registered users. So this is something that is clearly a societal phenomenon. And more than anything, it's created an awareness, I think at all levels, from just the person in the street to the CEOs and the boards that are running big companies, that AI is now ready for prime time, with some of its flaws, of course, but we also see, and people are realizing that this can be a productivity boost, a creativity boost, that it's going to change jobs, it's going to change the creative landscape, the education and research landscape. Maybe we'll say a little bit about that later on, but this is definitely something that is revolutionary, although ChatGPT is anything but revolutionary. I mean, people have been working on this for ages, including some of the people here today. It's just kind of revolutionary in the sense that it pushed awareness to what we can do with AI to a whole other level. And in that respect, risen to about 29 billion US, which makes it the 6th most valuable company in the United States, even though it's not really charging money yet. So also quite impressive feat. We have with us tonight 3 experts in the domain, and I'll let each one of them say a couple of words of introduction about themselves, and then a little bit about how you see the impact of, I will call it generative AI. AI is a big spectrum. We'll try to stay in the conversational, the generative AI. Like what your perspective on it is, where you think it is a game changer, where you think we have to be careful, maybe even about generalizing or jumping to conclusions, and maybe your direction. Just want to say one thing is Alban is here with us tonight. He's doing his Ph.D. on the subject, and his doctoral defense is in 2 days. So he accepted to be here despite that. And so a big thank you to Alban, and I'll let you get the game rolling.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm very pleased. So my name is Alban, and I'm a philosopher. I work on AI and intuition. This is the topic of my PhD. Basically, my question is, can neural networks be a model of intuition, which was a claim that people had in 2016 when AlphaGo defeated Lee Sedol. People were saying this is because AlphaGo has intuition, because Go is a type of game that we need intuition to play. To come back to ChatGPT, as you were saying, yeah, it's these things have been around for a long time, and ChatGPT has been a very interesting innovation on several levels. The first one, I think, is the interface, because you could play with these models. It's been a long time we could play with these models, but that's the first time you have an interface where it's easy to see how powerful it is. And the second one, I think, is the work they've done on the ethical level to train the model in order to have a lot of barriers that it cannot express itself on a lot of topics. I'm sure you already are familiar with this, even though it's very easy to bypass these barriers. So that's also quite new, because maybe you still have in mind the episode of Tay, or the episode of another chatbot that Meta released recently, which were disastrous because they were just saying the worst things that you can read on the internet, as they are trained on mainly on text that you can find on the internet. So on with ChatGPT, they've really done an impressive work, which was, I think, a 2-year work with hundreds of people working. It's a Kenyan company that have been it's human people labeling data and saying this is offensive, this should be banned, this should be banned, this should be banned, and after training the model, it kind of works, even if we can bypass it. So that's the second interesting innovation. Maybe a third point, and then I will pass. I think, considering the impact, there is, maybe you're familiar with the existentialist motto, and in philosophy we say, they were saying that essence comes after existence. With technology, it really applies. Like we have this model that's been released, but honestly, I wouldn't be able to say what will happen and what will be the impact, because it will come with the usage, what people do with it, what happens in the encounter between this model and the users will invent what will become this of this model. So we will, yeah.
Maybe a question, since you're talking of your own research is about intuition.
Yes.
So many of you maybe heard about the Google researcher
Lemoine, yeah.
who claimed that the AI is now intelligent, or at least conscious, and so he was labeled crazy and fired. But basically, I think he's saying is that there's like a form of intuition. From your own research, where are you on what you're going to defend in a couple of days? Do you think that this intuition is something, an attribute we can attribute to AI, or are you finding a way to term it a little bit differently, so that there's a difference between, let's say, human gut feeling intuition and artificial intuition?
Yes, there is difference. The claim of Lemoine was that the chatbot was sentient, so it was more about consciousness. And when you know the inner workings, if you spend some time detailing how it works, generally nobody goes with the claim. Generally, you abandon the claim because you understand how it works, and it stems from the very definition of what is an algorithm. An algorithm, from the beginning, from the Middle Ages, is a procedure that you can follow, and you can make a complex operation without having to think about it, without needing to be conscious. So the very idea of an algorithm is that the thing that operates the algorithm doesn't need consciousness. So once you go into the details of how does this algorithm work, then you don't see why you would claim it's sentient. But then what we can say now is that basically these chatbots are more or less able to pass the Turing test. Like they can emulate anything that we say. They can pass as a human. Quite. We could say that with Lambda or ChatGPT, and that goes with that refers to a problem in philosophy that it's very old. Is that if something looks conscious, it's very hard to know if it's really conscious or not. I don't have any proof, any scientific proof that Alan is really conscious. Maybe he's just a zombie pretending he's conscious. In philosophy, it's referred to as the hard problem of consciousness. Hard because it's easy in scientific problems. You can find a proof and discuss this proof. With consciousness, you can imagine that something, a zombie, could act as a human, do everything like a human, say, I am sad, I am happy, but without being sad and without being happy, just pretending he is. And that Lambda is exactly that. It's a very efficient zombie. It can say, well, that was in the transcript, I was moved by when I read Les Miserables. It can say, I am of course sentient. I want everybody at Google know that I am sentient. But it's a role play. It's playing the conscious entity. It is not in itself. So that's the point on consciousness. It is not, and if you look into the details of how it works, then it's kind of obvious. But then attributing consciousness is still a very hard problem. Regarding intuition, but maybe I'm speaking too long. You tell me. Regarding intuition, yeah, these models are trained by examples, so it's more induction than intuition. So it's from examples referring what are the rules and then applying these rules. If we have a definition of intuition, which would be seeing the meaning of something, I would rather say that they are in a way deprived of intuition, that they don't see the meaning. But in another way, especially with language models, they still encode a form of meaning, which is what are the relations between the words and what are the relations between the concepts, which are, according to the structuralist point of view, are the meaning of the words. Is the relation between one word and all the other words of the language is the meaning of that word. And the large language model managed to encode the meaning in that sense of words, but also of sentences, of many entities. And we are still at the beginning. We don't really know what has been encoded in that model. So we're discovering that they're able to role play in many different things. Yeah, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. There was one of the many examples, but one person was writing about how they were using ChatGPT as a psychotherapist, and they asked the ChatGPT to act as a behavioral therapist. And one of the things that he did was he asked the ChatGPT to interpret his dreams. And ChatGPT found a link between different dreams and a deeper meaning than the person would have ever found himself. And so there's like let's say, first level intuition, which we could discuss and interpret a dream together. But then finding similar meanings between several dreams, that second layer, deeper intuition, seems something that ChatGPT or equivalent seems to do better than we do. So when does that intuition into deeper meaning, when is that more something that AI can do even better than we can do? And then when do we call that a form of intuition?
Well, the intuition is only at the level of the user. ChatGPT here is a formidable tool to navigate into well, they call the latent space the how to say, the library of the concepts, or the library of the how the words are classified in. And what you're describing, what you're saying is that ChatGPT has encoded relations between symbols and is able to well, the user is able to navigate the relation between symbols thanks to ChatGPT. But the intuition is only at the level of the user, and ChatGPT is a kind of formidable librarian, orienting the user in how to relate that symbol with this other symbol, and providing possible interpretations. I think that's the power of this tool, is to provide lots of new interpretations, new forms. So it's possibilities, providing lots of when you I was working on a class on AI, and I needed examples. So of course, I went to ChatGPT and I have tens of examples and said, give me 10 more and give me 10 more. So that's, but then that relates to the question of creativity. It's a very specific type of creativity. It's the creativity of a librarian, saying this cultural form exists and could relate to your question, but this is not the creativity that living organisms have in a situation of crisis, which is different, where living organisms are able to change their behavior and invent new behaviors, invent new rules. That's a different type of creativity.
All right. Well, speaking of creativity, it's a great segue to the next speaker, Yann Lechelle. So Yann is a serial entrepreneur. I'd say playing with different forms of technology for quite some time in different continents and different contexts, US, UK, Europe. And I know recently you've had a little bit of impact in the area of voice recognition, conversational AI, all of the technologies that are linked to ChatGPT. What is your thinking today on the potential impact on how this is going to change our lives at the personal level, maybe productivity, at the company level? Who are we going to be firing? Who are we going to be hiring? Maybe a few words on that, and maybe a couple of words about yourself, just to introduce, because mine was a little bit too short.
Thank you, Alan. So perhaps my perspective should be on the business side of things and the opportunities that lie ahead. So a little bit about myself. I'm 50 years old. I started coding. I was 10 years old. So I've been in software all my life. And software has always been something fascinating because it seems like the possibilities are endless. But if you look at software all the way to deep learning today, we are riding an exponential curve, and the possibilities are speeding up. So I remember in 1992, 93, I was building neural networks. So essentially AI in a very similar way as we define it today in deep learning. So I had the ability to recognize spoken words, 4 of them, it didn't work, and 9 numbers, 10 numbers, it didn't work very well either. And AI has been going through a number of winters, and some people carried through, kept innovating, and also the machines kept improving in power and efficiency. So the models today look nothing like the models we could compute in 92, 93, but the methodology is fairly similar, It evolved marginally. Now, what's very interesting is that we are witnessing, and you mentioned it, a tipping point. The tipping point is the combination of iterations, exponentials, and general awareness. We all see now the potential of this technology. So there are tons of companies, literally thousands of companies that have invested over the past decade in chatbots. Chatbots, generally speaking, don't work really well. They're quite deceiving, and I think you're going to talk about anthropomorphic behaviors, perhaps. We try to simulate human behaviors, interactions, to make us feel like it is interactive. If you go back in time, Apple brought Siri, and Siri was a total disaster in 2014. Total disaster, because they tried to create warmth and the perception that we were essentially dealing with an assistant. Even the name refers to a function that human beings have had for a long time. So we are reaching a point where we can both understand language, and the company you were referring to is a startup that was created in 2015 and that we sold in 2019 to Sonos, the speakers company. Now, Snips was able to understand language in a way that could be shrunk into a small device. So this is voice recognition on the edge. Now, the one thing that we didn't know how to do very well in our startup at the time was to produce answers and generate answers that were intelligible. At the time, I was thinking we should stop to try and deceive humans with assistants that are actually machines that do not pass the Turing test. Because if you do anthropomorphic interfaces, then humans are fooled into thinking that they are interacting with other humans. Now, the limits here are being proven wrong because we've reached that tipping point. These assistants are make-believe. So I'm looking at this ecosystem of startups, and I've talked to hundreds of entrepreneurs in that space, both on the voice recognition side and on the generative side now. The companies that failed because the bots were insufficient failed, but they've also captured knowledge, so they could be reborn on the basis of this evolution. Other companies have existing bot technology, they're going to upgrade it because OpenAI is opening an API. So soon we'll be able to plug into ChatGPT and create side products from that. Any of you could start a business today on the basis of ChatGPT Open API, right? So now that everyone understands what we can do with it, the imagination has been captured again. Think science fiction. I'm thinking ChatGPT is more like, if you like Star Wars, it's more like C3PO. It's very verbose, has a lot of knowledge or apparent knowledge. It's quite useless in most cases. In some cases, it's got the one piece of information you need. Now, the creative one is R2D2, right? Different type of intelligence. But not quite science fiction because it's happening today. So I'm extrapolating this, and I'm thinking, also talking to entrepreneurs who are leaders in AI today. So there's a French company, or actually a company in the US founded by French people called Hugging Face. Hugging Face is an amazing company because they thought the value is in the models, not in the data that feeds the models. So they put models on the shelf. And the founder said recently, 6 months, I give it 6 months. By then we'll have half a dozen models open sourced. And a ChatGPT model costs about $10 million to create. It's only $10 million to create. So if you think Google had taken the search by storm, actually, side note, we've been using ChatGPT-like technology for a long time. Google search. When you type a word, there's a probabilistic word next to it and a list. It's very similar.
Which was developed by a French company.
Also. So similar techniques, but now we've taken it to the prose level. Train of thought. So basically, you're going to take these companies that are going to be able to use open source versions of it, specialized versions of it. And then ChatGPT or GPT-4, the iteration from that, where you can shrink it in size, where you can embed it on a device, run locally, and so on and so forth. So I take that train of thought, and I'm thinking companies are going to spring like crazy. They're going to be creating content. So we've talked about ChatGPT, but we can talk about also the other visual generative technologies, image generation. I think we may be witnessing a devaluation of content in terms of its value. If everyone and every company is able to generate content, then we accelerate what we've been seeing actually on social media, which is the post-truth era. So what does it mean for us? Will we be able to sort the creative stuff and the good stuff from the fake stuff, from the overloaded and rehashed content, which makes me believe that we're going to have to be, or we might have to start focusing on the essential things that make us human, which is everything that is sensorial and everything that actually allows us to go back to direct interactions. Because this is going to create an overload of information, an overload of content. So some companies are going to be able to capitalize on this really quickly. Others are going to be part of the noise. But I'm thinking one step ahead. So in other words, how do we remain human when machines are saturating us with content that feels like it's human generated? So that is my two-sided approach to analyzing the business opportunities. On the one hand, we'll have tons of business opportunities because we've reached that tipping point to be able to do things that we've wanted to be doing for the past 20 years or so, right? Chatting with machines and using chatbots to solve CRM problems, support level, FAQ level problems. But then this is going to be taking the conversation to a whole different level, which means that we might have new opportunities to counter the effect of this overload of generated content.
So maybe a comment and a question. Like, one of the things, I have a friend of mine who owns a consulting company in the UK, and I was asking him about the impacts of ChatGPT, and he told me that he fired 5 junior analysts who were mostly just preparing presentations for him and the senior partners, and that they were no longer needed. And so you can already see some levels of maybe middle management that will disappear, like the assistants and the secretaries of yesteryear. Where do you see that kind of impact with these kind of technologies, generative AI? Is it the creatives that are going to disappear? Is it the juniors? Like, and where do you see the counter side of maybe use cases where companies will need to hire a different kind of talent in order to harness this technology?
So I don't see any immediate impact because, to be frank, that technology is not quite mature. But if we take this forward, of course, this will have impact. But any breakthrough in technology has had an impact on the job market. Cars have, replaced carriage and horses, and and so on and so forth. So it's going to happen. But again, exponential technologies tend to disrupt the workforce faster. Now, again, trying to think about where we need to be focusing our energy as humans is perhaps creative thinking, number one, which means we need to define what machines, or to what extent machines can be creative. So your work is essential to that. Critical thinking. Critical thinking, to me, is going to be a key asset. And so hopefully the educational system will start to factor this in to bring the next generation and prepare them to face this challenge. And then, of course, some professions will have to review their criteria. So, you were saying earlier that some theses could be written by a bot. I think the bar exam is almost passed by ChatGPT, actually. So they get half the grade to pass. So it's quite amazing. So that means that the bar is raised, or the cursor has to be moved to some degree. Because, and I'd love to hear about robots and what they bring into but I like the idea of cobots. And I love the idea of using AI and technology to enhance our ability. In fact, I think that is a human superpower.
Yeah.
Humans are what they are precisely because we have the ability to create technology to help us become the next generation of humanity. So maybe we talk about singularity another day.
Yeah. The singularity is near, as they say. Maybe just a question that will be a transition to Amit and the robotics side of the question. Amit often speaks about the uncanny valley, where robots are perfectly anthropomorphic and they resemble a real human, and that freaks the hell out of us because it's almost human, but not quite. What about on the voice side? Like, for example, I have another good friend from Israel with a technology company that sells technology to call centers, in which you can have somebody from Tunisia at a call center with a Parisian accent when he calls Paris, and to have a British accent when they call the UK, and basically AI corrects their voice, and so the accent is always local. We also know with ChatGPT, you can make requests like, write me an article in the style of McKinsey, and it'll adapt to, and so I could say, well, send an email in the style of Yann Lechelle, and soon I'll be able to call and say, let me speak in the style of Yann Lechelle. How much have you looked into this kind of the advanced use cases of voice with AI? Is it something you're excited about, something you're worried about? Maybe a little bit there.
So this is the applied version of what I was referring to, which is probably we're going to have to start going back to sensorial interactions between humans, because technology will tend to disappear because it actually maps our own interfaces. So robots, they interface with the body in some ways, and AI is able to use voice recognition and responses to interact. So the SNP's tagline was to make technology disappear, because at some point technology becomes ambient. Computers are clunky today, and an iPhone is actually still clunky. You have to take it out of your pocket. And you've seen the advances with the Google Glass, which was a failure because it was clunky. But very soon, we'll have interfaces that actually are really seamlessly integrated in glasses. So if you combine augmented reality plus voice recognition plus voice responses in a small implant that you put here, actually Apple already has it, right? With the AirPods and the transparency approach. So soon you miniaturize that and you have the whole package. So this notion of transparent and ambient computing will accelerate. It may take 20 years, but it will accelerate. There's no question about that. So what we're seeing is just each vertical is trying to do its thing, but the technologies are there converging so that we can use computing to perhaps become a true Homo erectus again, because with the phones we're actually quite bent. But the idea to actually become enhanced, truly augmented, to allow us to become, I hope, a better version of ourselves. Right now, it's not looking very good. But hopefully we can become enhanced, both in terms of knowledge, in terms of interactions with the world. And we know that the world also needs help in that sense, because that's our only world. So we need to address the very issue. So how do we use technology to go faster to solve problems? And to me, that is the one interesting question.
Thank you very much, Yann. We'll move to Amit, just so that you know. We'll have about 10 more minutes of chatting, and then we'll open the floor to questions. So if you have questions, make sure you take those mental notes when we have the microphone in the other direction. Amit Pandey, I think many of you have seen or heard Amit speak already. Mr. Robotics. I don't think he's a zombie or a robot, using Alban's terminology, but definitely very versed in this area, both on the research side, the practical side, the business side, and I'd say the philosophical side. So it comes with very different take and interesting take on this. Maybe Amit, obviously you've been promoting robots for quite some time, and now this convergence of form factors with the conversational AI. Is this something you're excited about? Is this something you're saying, oh shit, it's about time? I just wished it had arrived earlier. Or is it something that you feel might be taking us in a different direction?
Yeah, I think there are different perspectives, and I have to perhaps choose one of those perspectives today. But before that, I would simply ask three questions from you people to better shape in the discussion today. So the first one is, how many of you have interacted with a robot? Just raise your hand if there is anyone. Okay. And how many of you have interacted with a chatbot? Great. So my third question will be after. So I think at least we know that, okay, there are people who has experience with robots as well as chatbots. So personally, I have spent, I think, equal amount of time with human and robots. And I have experience from both, from human and robots as well. And what I have been trying to do is to bridge the gap, the expectation from the human about the capabilities and behavior of the robots. And that's where I have been also pushing the boundaries of intelligence in the direction where it will be somehow seen as social intelligence in the robots. And social intelligence can have various way of embodiment in a machine, and we can use data driven approaches, or we can use computational model based approaches by understanding the human behavioral psychology and then try to create some model out of that. So we have been doing this for a long time. So what was happening when robots were there and earlier, and when we were interacting with the robot, many times when we talk like verbally something, we get the answer, I don't know, from the robot. That was frustrating, but that was also showing that there are limitations and boundaries in the system, in the machine. So my third question is that how many of you have ever heard a chatbot saying, I don't know? And how many have you ever heard from system like a ChatGPT, I don't know? So you see, the hands are raising lower in numbers. That's also, I think, something which we have to really think about very carefully, that how much intelligence is good enough and reliable enough. And is there something really existing or going to exist which knows everything? What do we mean by knowing? If a system says something, if it produces an answer, is it grounded or not? Yeah, there a reasoning capability behind that or not? Can we rely on this type of system for critical situation, for understanding the current situation and relying to take a decision, informed decision based on that? So this is simply one part of the story, because when we start to embody this type of interaction capabilities in some form, that's what I think you have been saying, the we are moving towards embodiment, either it is robot or a virtual character. The perception of the people who are interacting with this type of system also changes, in the way that they started to see, instead of interacting with something, they started to see they are interacting with someone. And when you are interacting with someone, your expectation, your level of trust, everything get affected. And that's where we have to again be very careful and create the boundary. And since it is going to be a mass phenomena, this type of system will be everywhere, everyone will be interacting. We have to create the right kind of awareness also, that what to expect, where to rely, where to question. So it is a shift, a radical shift, in the sense that we were typing something in the internet, we have been given a set of options, and then we have been using our own judgment and intelligence to find the right information from that, and a more contextual and grounded information. Should we keep that as the technology developer, enabler of the technology, pushing technology to the society, or we should really make that vanish and give an answer which people think should think that okay, this is the right answer? So that's where I think we will again need to debate more. So there will be more social, legal, ethical issues which will be coming, and at the same time, it again depends that who is teaching this type of system, where is the ultimate knowledge, because it is again coming from the people. So bias will be there, and how we can evaluate in this kind of system, again going back to intuition, where is the ground truth of intuition, how we define intuition. So there will be many interesting things which will be coming with time. So I think I can stop here. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a movie recently called Rob Guns Has Gone Bad or something like that, like a Pixar type movie about kids having a robot as their best friend. And the robot understood them perfectly, knew when to post pictures to Instagram. And anyway, it was like, but you can imagine already today, and we going back to this notion of uncanny, but if you take the notion of intuition, the feeling people have, it's kind of past the Turing test. People feel like I'm heard and understood, and there's empathy. And there, like, are you seeing a new use for robots that you didn't expect? Because people are adopting them as their best friends. People who are living alone now can have companionship. Are you finding new use cases thanks to the conversational side that maybe you didn't see happening this quickly or that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I think obviously there will be use cases which will be making robot closer to the people, to the society, and there can be lots of societal application. Personally, I have worked a lot in healthcare, in education domain, for putting robots in social environment, basically, instead of making them isolated. So once robots are in a social environment, conversational capability is one of the key aspects for those robots to be more present, more engaging with the people. And again, the question will be that how we can train this kind of conversational system to be more context aware and providing the answers which will be more relevant to the people. And obviously they can even be used to teach something to the children. There is this interesting methodology, I think we all know, that learning by teaching. So why not we can use children like this type of capabilities. Children are teaching something to the robot, and robot is responding appropriately, and then the model is tuned in the way that robot responses are encouraging the child to learn something during this teaching process. It is same for people in elderly care facility. Like we can really have conversational system which will remind people about some interesting moments of the life, and their cognitive health might be better compared to once they are isolated. So I see like the acceleration of this type of deployment of solutions in social space because of this kind of technology.
And where are you like the most excited? There's healthcare, and we're talking about, we can't find nurses. Like
Mm.
United States says that they're going to be lacking 300,000 nurses by 2027, so within 5 years. Is it in the healthcare area? Is it in education? Is it industrial? Is there one sector that you're more excited about or that you're working on as a priority because either passion or belief or conviction or opportunity?
Yeah, I think healthcare, including the elderly care, can be one of the most immediate sector where we should put effort, because we have all seen the social distancing. This term is too common now because of COVID, and it has also moved in the direction of social isolation. So healthcare sector is very much needed even for the future and in the current needs, to avoid any kind of isolation and distancing for people who are living because of whatever reason in a environment where they are not surrounded by enough people. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, we promised you to give you the mic at 45, so it's 46. We're 1 minute late. Yeah, I think there's a question here for Nicolas, please.
Hello? Yeah. Hi, and thank you for the discussion. I was wondering about what you were saying about the verticals converging in the technology. And I think in the 90s, there was a whole discussion about artificial life. And how do you see artificial life on the side of artificial intelligence? Do you see it converging, and how do you feel that space is growing right now in that context?
Do you say artificial life?
Yeah.
So this is really far from my domain of expertise. So I don't see a convergence today, because it's from my standpoint, I'm not seeing the two sides converging yet. To me, artificial intelligence is really, really limited today. So when we talk about consciousness and creativity, we are so far from it, because these algorithms are actually well contained. When you have a session with ChatGPT, it's true that you can have a sequence in dialogue, but once your session is over, that's it. That instance of a dialogue is dead, right? It doesn't compound. There's no such thing as a collective intelligence of ChatGPT. Or at least I'm not aware of it today. So these algorithms, they live in their own bottles. The two do not mix with anything that's happening in organic chemistry and all these things. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I'm not seeing any particular convergence today, because we are so far from these models that exist in large data centers, right? They are massive. They require machines and racks of machines and megawatts of energy. They're not small yet. And if they were small, they would fit in a smartphone, which is far from being organic in some ways, right? This is a massive piece of junk, right? So I'm not seeing artificial life being developed in any way closer to where AI is being used today. So the two things are being developed on their own stream. And I don't know, again, if we take singularity as a point of sublimation in the future, the two of them don't necessarily converge, but one of them could be creating the other. Because I don't see one instance being in the other before something really radical happening. So we're talking about generative AI here, but we haven't talked about, how these gigantic models and computing power are allowing us to explore synthetic proteins and molecules. Now, this is the next step to be able to produce additional technology to reach that point that you're referring to, potentially. So I think these will be step functions, but they don't converge in the same way. So I see very split silos between these things. I don't know if...
Yeah. But maybe just an extra word on that. There was AlphaGo. There's also AlphaFold, which is looking at the protein folding, which is considered kind of key to new life forms and/or artificial life. And there was recently kind of a paper talking about how little it's actually produced, even though it's gone, it goes through millions of possibilities and probabilities and can generate a lot of good ideas, but nothing has actually come out of it. And a lot of researchers are quite disappointed because they thought it would be already the next step, and they realized that there's a missing step function before it can actually be useful and bring us closer to that kind of an approach. Maybe another question. I see in the back. Yeah, Sangram. I find it fitting that Mona Lisa would bring you the microphone.
Thank you very much. Very nice, very interesting discussion. I have a mainly question for Yann. You said touch upon something critical thinking, this new generations. I have a 15-year-old son. That's why it makes more important for me. So these people, they are very easy in on the technology. They are all aware of this ChatGPT. He knows for last 6 months, probably all these things. But how to impact this critical thinking nowadays? Do you have any solutions, or you think some ideas about imparting critical thinking to these kids, new generation?
I think the first step was mentioned by Amit, because it's all about the deception. So today we use computers in a very predictive way, right? We use an Excel sheet and we expect an answer that is mathematically accurate, right? So we do not question the machine's ability to be wrong. Now, with Google search, we sort of developed an intuition for, a lot of it is advertising based. So you've been trained to see what's advertising, what's not. And Google is required to actually mark something as being advertising. So you build new reflexes in the way you deal with information. But I was thinking when you were talking about deception, so we do expect machines to behave in a pretty deterministic way and so on and so forth. So we expect them to also say the truth because they're supposed to be helpful tools. What about humans? When someone talks to you, sometimes you say, bullshit. I call bullshit on what you just said because I'm using my critical thinking. So I think we need to start building critical thinking quickly because new technologies are going to start to deceive us, right? So we need to allow ourselves to think that machines will be faster than us in deceiving us. Therefore, we need to be doubtful. To me, that is the first thing. And so that's why we need to link it to fake news and, deep fakes. When you see something, the first thing you should ask yourself is it real? That's why I'm also regressing to the point where, for now, the only truthful interaction is with a direct human, face-to-face. Forget phones, forget video conferencing, all of that can be faked today, even in real time. So, number one, let's define what is truly a human interaction, and let's define what it's not. And when it's not, when there is an interface or a machine behind it, we need to start questioning it deeply. To me, that is the first level of critical thinking. And then the real difficulty is when we face a ChatGPT that has gigantic knowledge, human scale knowledge, the entire Wikipedia / encyclopedic knowledge. How can we compete with that as a 10-year-old, as a 15-year-old, as a 30-year-old, as a 50-year-old, as a 60-year-old? We don't have that knowledge, so we can't possibly challenge everything. Well, we have to start to.
There's been a lot of talk about rethinking education at the K-12 level. And one of the things they're talking about in the era of generative AI is that it'll be much more oriented on critical thinking. How can you validate the veracity of the text that you're reading? And so there's already quite a lot of thinking about that, going from the professor, the teacher, the instructor talking about what kind of prompt did you use when you asked ChatGPT a question. How can you avoid confusion? For example, AI often confuses two philosophers who have exactly opposite views, but because they're compared often in articles, it often confuses context with content. So you can speak about Jeremy Bentham and be contrasted with neoliberalism and think that Bentham was a liberalist. And so a lot of that is to understand. And so it's actually going into understanding how algorithms work and think, which is kind of referring to the work that Alban has been doing, and to kind of help the students of this new era think algorithmically so that they can think critically about what they're reading, the questions they'll be asking, and how they can analyze what they're. So it's actually quite interesting from education point of view. The paradigm will be very different. We used to spend time in libraries looking for information. It was hours or days, and then it became minutes on Google. Now it'll be seconds on ChatGPT. But it still means that we have to rethink how you think about what you're reading, and that will be critical thinking. And there's a lot of interesting work going on in that area. And it's kind of an oh shit moment for education, which is quite interesting. Anytime you have to rethink what you do, it's very interesting. I think there was another question here. Actually, one there and then one here. Yeah. Please.
I have several, but I'll reduce it to one. Do you think we need to have a new word for knowledge, like in France? In French, we have savoir et connaissance, that split the difference between two different types of knowledge, to be able to separate what is, I don't know, just compiled from set of books to give you a content, and something that is through knowing about experience and whatever. Thank you.
This is an excellent question. I think what is in the model should not be called knowledge and should bear another word. You're absolutely right, because it's like a book in a library. The knowledge is in the book, but in a sense, the book doesn't know itself. You need to go there and read and then apply your critical thinking to what you're reading. So definitely we should use another word. Also, so that users would be more aware of what they're interacting with. And just to come back to the question of critical thinking, I would say I think first, it's not that complicated to understand how it works. The basics are not that difficult. I mean, what is an algorithm is not something difficult to explain. And then the basics of neural networks, of how they're trained. I don't think that would be that difficult to explain to children, and I'm currently working on that. So it's difficult, but we can do it, and it won't be long. So first, if you know how it works, then you're not deceived as easily. Second, if you just go with your children, experiment with these tools. If you have experience of Google, you know where it can lead you, you know how it can mislead you. Just you build a familiarity with the tools. And third, I think that necessary critical thinking applies to everything, as has already been said, and we are here for this. I mean, just go to philosophy class. We will be glad to.
Maybe just the interesting thing is in French, we have savoir, but we have then savoir-être, savoir-faire. In management, we talk about savoir-faire. And so I'm sure somebody will come up with a better definition for this new type of savoir. I think there was a question here in front.
Hi, everyone. I have a question. You talked a lot about AI and human. I want to ask a question. What about AI versus AI? Just imagine extreme case. Battlefield, drone plus AI. Ukraine against Russia. Who wins? Who make the rules? Who decide about the rules? We have Geneva Convention. What about AI? What's your thought on that? I think so. All of them in today. I think so.
There is well, sorry, there is no. If you have only AI, you have no AI. There is a website called Anatomy of an AI made by Kate Crawford and another researcher. She takes just the Alexa stuff. So if you see only the Alexa, but if you open it, in order to have it working, you need hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of humans providing the network, the electricity, the data, the software, maintaining all of this. So if you don't have human, you don't have AI. So you cannot imagine a battle between two AIs if you don't have the people behind each AI providing the data, the electricity, the network, the objectives that this AI will have to fulfill. That would be my answer.
I think it's a bigger question for making policy around it, because AI can be seen as a small bubbles which are emerging at different places, or we can see this as a collective intelligence if they are connected. But how to create the right kind of regulations so that I think you are raising the question which is equivalent to the human also, human versus human. So if there is really, if you see there are two AIs, how we will regulate that, and that's the bigger question, and I think we will need a different kind of committee to address that. Yeah.
All right, maybe one last question. Yep, Chandru.
So it's about AI and consciousness. So currently we are seeing that ChatGPT, for example, is trying to reply an answer every time, even though it's false. How can we regulate that, or how can they regulate themselves to be humble and say, I don't know? That's kind of reply of your first question when you're asking whoever experience, I don't know, with a chatbot.
So you never get the experience of I don't know from chatbot, right?
Very few, not it depends, but very basic. We do have that, but for very advanced chatbot like ChatGPT, it's trying to reply every time, even with very elaborate question, which make it very trustful, even though we know that it's completely false.
That's one of the challenges which I was mentioning, that once there is a huge knowledge and also there is a mechanism to stick together two parts of the information. Where is that mechanism which will say that, okay, this is the reliable information or this is beyond my boundaries? And that's where we have to also put effort as the community, and that how AI knows that my knowledge is, or what I am creating is a dream, it is not reality. And that's where I think these are the limitations. I think you also you will agree on this, and we have to find solution for that. So that's why perhaps we have to combine different approaches together, not only data driven, but again rule based approaches, and having some high level of filtering, and humans should be still in the loop for making those type of system in the future. So it will take some time, and it will take a community effort for this.
There's already a first layer of curation in ChatGPT, by the way. So they have rules, but if you think statistically about the model, if you ask ChatGPT if the Earth is round, right? We know the answer, I think. We're all scientific here, right? So let's assume the answer is yes. ChatGPT has a probabilistic version of that. So they're going to say, yes, the Earth is round. But what ChatGPT thinks is that the Earth is 95% round, because other people on the internet have said the contrary. But the majority has won. So the truth is probabilistic based on the existing corpus. So critical thinking, to the question earlier, should be, okay, if I understand, and you were saying, you're correct, it's not that hard to understand how this works. We can work on a model with a corpus of 20 words, and with a bit of pedagogy, understand how this works. Now, this works with a gazillion words, right? We're talking about massive models with billions of parameters. So it's a statistical model. The answer is never, I don't know. because people have said so many things, and the contrary is that there is always a 1% probability that this is either true or not true. Now, what they've done is curate the answers by providing rules for topics that are out of question. But you can also jailbreak ChatGPT. You can find weaknesses in the model to make it say things that are supposed to be filtered out. And then what you see is the idiocy of the model, or the extremist version, which we had in the tail model, right? The TAI in the past. So the TAI model, which was trained on Twitter, and Twitter is a horrible place, right? It's a horrible place where the trolls have won. Probably the flat earthers have won as well. So on Twitter, the earth is flat, almost for sure. So it depends where it's being trained and what sort of fail-safe mechanisms are put. ChatGPT has no particular good reasons to say, I don't know.
Another solution would be to add an extra layer where another engine would see the statement and provide the source to this statement in trusted databases of knowledge like Wikipedia or archive or stuff like this. And there is another a similar chatbot made by AI21, I think is the name of the company, which is precisely trying to do this. A chatbot which provides sources for what is written.
There's also interest like Humming Face that you mentioned earlier. They're also developing AI that can discover if the text was generated by AI. So you will have AI against AI in various different versions.
Actually, I wanted to make a quick comment on AI versus AI, because we talked about AlphaGo, but the first AlphaGo was AI helped by human beings, right? Because players in the flesh were helping the algorithm, and that was solved in a year, basically. But they did the same thing with the chess, and they had an AI play against the other one. The previous models were using humans also in rules and grandmaster plays, right? So taking the library of the very best games from the grandmasters. Now, once AlphaGo was solved, they did the same for chess. In 3 hours, AI against AI, without humans, without grandmaster plays. And that's it. They nailed it. And that machine is beyond any human being capabilities. So AI against AI, if you have a super fast and super available computing power, can be extremely powerful in an adversarial consideration, right? So if you're trying to make a machine, ace a particular game, a set of rules, AI against AI is radically more powerful.
All right. Well, we're out of time. One of the things I'm interested and curious about will be kind of like we had a guest speaker from Siri come speak, thanks to one of Amit's friends with our executive MBAs, and she was saying she was working on Siri in several different languages, and she was saying how much she learned about humanity from what people were saying to Siri. And the questions they asked and the kind of interactions they were having, and she found it fascinating. And I have a feeling that ChatGPT maybe won't be intuitive, to your point, or uncanny, but I think there'll be a lot of insight that will come of it, and I think OpenAI will provide that later. Like just like Google, like what are the top 10 searches this year? I think we'll be seeing things that we'll learn about us as humanity. What are the things we're asking ChatGPT about? What are the dreams that we had that we've asked ChatGPT to interpret? I think there'll be a lot of interesting kind of mirroring back humanity, because you can have very open and candid conversations with AI that you might never dare to have with a human, because you know that it's not a human behind that. And so I think it'll be very interesting to see what kind of insights we get about our own souls, thanks to this pretty amazing tool that has gone mainstream very quickly. Thank you very much to the three speakers and your insights. They will be staying for the Galette des Rois that we'll be having afterwards. I'm supposed to remind everybody that the next event, I don't know if we can move the slide, the next event will be on March 15th, the same place, almost same time, with Michel Zalka, who is kind of an Uber consultant and philosopher. And we'll be talking about this notion that's called braided organizations. So we're leaving the realm of AI and we're thinking more of the future of what companies will look like when there's no real boundary to the company. The partnerships, the ecosystem, once everything is integrated, there is no inside and outside anymore. And the companies that can be agile and use this approach will probably be the companies that will succeed. Speaking about this earlier to the speakers, I was reminded, that companies like Google, Facebook, Meta, and others already have this kind of approach using research, companies that they invest in, companies that they partner with, external consultants, et cetera, and they already have this kind of notion of a braided organization. Michel will present that and give us a few examples and tell us why this is such a paradigm shift in terms of corporate strategy and what kind of talent companies need to involve in what they do in order to succeed in the future. So I think you'll enjoy that as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our speakers. Good luck, Alban, in today's time. And thank you all.